Hi, I'm Hazel, and this is a guide to normal and heroic difficulty Sisters of the Moon in the Tomb of Sargeras. This is a 3-phase fight that takes place under a cycling moon. If you took Warlord's era Boomkin and turned it into a boss fight, you might get something like this. The 3 sisters share health and only one will be active at a time. You start with Kasparian, at 70% you get Moonstrike, and then Lunaspyre comes in at 40%. Throughout the fight, the 2 inactive bosses will still pester your raid with mechanics from their faded and untargetable forms. The moon will be continually rotating between light and darkness, pausing for a bit at both full and new moon. Standing in light stacks up your arcane damage taken, while standing in the dark stacks up your shadow damage taken. Switching sides will trigger an astral purge, which clears your stacks and does damage to you. Full and new moon will trigger a major mechanic for each phase, so keeping an eye on the moon can help you plan ahead. You start out fighting Huntress Kasparian, who is all about glaives. Twilight Glaive will target a random player with a glaive, which boomerangs out and then back to the boss. Watch where it's going, dodge the glaive, no big deal. Moon Glaive is our tank mechanic of Phase 1. The 2 tanks will need to stand near each other to share the damage of Moon Glaive and use active mitigation for each one. The first target of the Moon Glaive will get the Discorporate debuff. The other tank should taunt, while the Discorporate tank needs to go trigger an Astral Purge by stepping across the moonlight, or wait out their debuff if the moon is full or gone. That's all that Kasparian will do in Phase 1, but the other 2 sisters will be wreaking havoc from their faded forms. You can't damage them, but they can sure damage you. Phase 1 Lunaspyre has Lunar Strike and Moonburn. Lunar Strike is unavoidable arcane damage that will ping individuals in the raid. That'll hurt more when your light stacks are high. Moonburn puts a dot onto random players. Triggering an Astral Purge removes the dot, so if you get Moonburn, go step into the other side of the moonlight whenever possible. Phase 1 Moonstrike has Shadow Shot, which is the same ping mechanic as Lunar Strike, only with shadow damage. She'll also throw down Twilight Volleys onto random ranged. The range should be spread out away from melee to avoid dropping those onto their friends. Incorporeal Shot is the major full or new moon mechanic of Phase 1. When the entire room is covered with either light or darkness, Moonstrike will target a random player with Incorporeal Shot, represented by this milky beam thing. The targeted player should step back to make room, while others need to get into the beam to help soak the shot. At 70%, Kasparian fades out and Yathei Moonstrike comes to play. She'll summon a Moon Talon Owl, which needs to be tanked and cleaved down. It doesn't do anything special until 25% when it starts freaking out and screeching and stuff. At that point, everyone needs to swap to it and finish it off. Rapid Shot replaces Shadow Shot and will do a decent amount of shadow damage to a random player. Healers will need to keep an eye out for this. If you get Rapid Shot on you and you have really high dark stacks, consider switching sides to reduce the amount of damage that you're taking from the dot. She'll continue casting Twilight Volley like before, so range still need to stay spread out. Phase 2 Kasparian keeps her Twilight Glaive ability. It's tougher now because you're not really looking at her anymore, so be aware of where she is so you can dodge the glaive. Spectral Glaive replaces Moon Glaive for Phase 2. It basically boils down to dodge more glaives. It's easier to do when you're spread out a bit, which you should be anyway for the volley, so you're good. Phase 2 Lunaspyre continues putting out Moonburn and Lunar Strike. She also gains Embrace of the Eclipse, which is the major full moon mechanic of Phase 2. She puts a shield up on herself and a healing absorb on the whole raid, both of which explode if they're not taken down within 12 seconds. The raid needs to stack up for healing, and healers should have a cooldown rotation to make sure that the absorb bubbles are healed off. DPS focus on taking the shield off the boss, and everyone's happy. At 40%, Priestess Lunaspyre comes out to finish the fight. She keeps tossing out moonburns to the very end. Lunar Fire is the tank mechanic of Phase 3, and it replaces Lunar Strike. It puts a stacking 30-second dot on the tanks. Tanks should taunt swap at about 3 stacks to allow their dot to drop off. Lunar Beacon puts a debuff on players that drops silencing damage zones when it expires. Move to the edge with Lunar Beacon to avoid dropping it in the group. Phase 3 Kasparian is still tossing out glaives like they're going out of style. During full or new moon, she gets Glaive Storm. Shockingly enough, Glaive Storm tosses out glaives that need to be dodged. If you eat a glaive, it'll shatter, kind of like in Glazer from Vault of the Wardens, so stay clear of the center of the room to make it easier to scooch. Phase 3 Moonstrike will keep tossing out Twilight Volleys to dodge and Shadow Shots to further irritate healers. All in all, Phase 3 is a hectic race to the finish with a lot of movement required to stay safe. I promise that once you're doing it, this fight is easier than it sounds on paper. On Heroic, you'll need to deal with 2 full moon mechanics per phase instead of just 1. Both of the fated bosses will do their thing, so you get Incorporeal Shot and Embrace in Phase 1, Embrace and Glavestorm in Phase 2, and Glavestorm and Incorporeal Shot in Phase 3. Aside from that, it's the same fight as normal with bigger numbers. So that's the Sisters of the Moon. There's a lot going on, but just figure out what's needed from you for each thing and you'll be okay. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Tomb of Sargeras guides. Please consider leaving a like if you liked it, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye!